everyone, and welcome to another rock-tastic episode of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is Jen Peeples.
Hi, how you doing?
Pretty good. Today is Sunday, September 27th. We are a live call-in internet atheist show based in Austin, Texas. In order to call in, you will need a computer set up with Skype, a program freely available from Skype.com. Simply add the username Atheist TV, all one word, no punctuation, 2 T's in the middle, to your contact list and send a message to that user saying what your topic will be, and wait for an acknowledgement that they are calling you. As they say in showbiz, don't call us, we'll call you. Messaging us is no guarantee that you'll get a call, but not messaging us is a guarantee that you won't get a call, so you might as well try. The Atheist Experience is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. I'm a little bit under the weather today, so forgive me if I sound snotty. You can find out more by visiting www.atheist-community.org. When you do, be sure to check out the FAQ page for answers to frequently asked questions that we receive on the show. This show is live on ustream.com every Sunday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Central Time. To watch us live, please visit the official Atheist Experience website, www.atheist-experience.com. Click on Live Stream at the top of the page. You can also participate in a chat room during the show. Also at the website, you will find audio and video archives from past episodes. If you click on Archive, you will find a list of programs that includes links to both audio and video downloads, as well as a rapidly updated audio podcast. You can catch fan-selected clips of the Atheist Experience on YouTube, and you can also see full episodes of the show at blip.tv, or you can subscribe to the podcast. In addition to this program, the ACA sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio, another podcast called The Nonprofits. Visit www.nonprofitsradio.com, PROPHETS, for more information. The next episode will be aired next week on Saturday, October 3rd. Wait, won't it? Were we jiggering the schedule? Okay. It will not be aired next week on Saturday, October 3rd. Tune in and check on October 10th. Weekly meetings for the Atheist Community of Austin are hosted at Romeo's on Barton Springs from 11:30 to 1 every Sunday, except for the first Sunday of each month, where we will host a lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. The next lecture will be held next week, October 4th, but as far as I've heard, the speaker and topic still have yet to be announced.
Actually, I think we're doing a panel discussion.
Panel discussion on?
Topic TBA.
Okay.
Panels.
Yeah.
Last time I made the mistake of going there, I got roped into being on the panel. If you can't make it to the morning meetings, you can join us for dinner right after this here program, beginning at 6:30 about every Sunday. Most of the people involved with the production of the Atheist Experience will head for Plucker's Wing Bar in North Austin. The address is 11066 Pecan Park Boulevard. It's near Lakeline Mall, and it's a great opportunity to hang out with everybody here. Finally, the ACA also hosts an Atheist Happy Hour every Thursday, beginning at around 7 p.m. at the Dog and Duck Pub, located at the corner of 17th and Guadalupe. If you'd like to get in touch with us, but you don't feel like calling in, you can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. We get way more email than we can possibly respond to, although Matt does an almost superhuman job of trying to respond to them all. But, you know, just write in and let us know what's on your mind, and somebody will at least read it, and you might get lucky with a reply. And be sure to check out the unofficial show blog at atheistexperience.blogspot.com. Okay, special announcements, nothing major coming up, but last night, if you're already listening to this show, it's too late for you to sign up for the Austin Bat Cruise, because we were on it last night and it was a blast. from what I heard, the total head count was there were 74 adults and 5 kids. And we all got up on the boat on the river downtown and parked ourselves under the bridge right at sunset and got to watch and be pooped on by millions of bats.
Yeah, I got peed on, so I had a shower after.
There wasn't really all that much poop, but some people pay extra for that. It was, in fact, a roaring success. So if you have any poop needs next year, come again, because it was awesome. And I hear that lots of people had a great time and went to Esther's Folly afterwards, which I didn't because I had one of the 5 kids. But lots and lots of fun. And by the way, this is an extra announcement. Somebody left their watch on the boat, and if you think that it is yours, email tv@atheist-community.org and say what kind of watch you lost.
And I will say that if you didn't know about the Bat Cruise,
right,
you have no excuse, because we have a Twitter account, and I've been tweeting updates about the Bat Cruise for 6 weeks now. So,
and what is the Twitter account that people should follow for all their exciting ACA
it's
updates?
Inside the ACA, no spaces. Just type Inside the ACA, and you should.
Right. I follow it, and so should you.
That's right.
Not only will you get announcements about the show, but about upcoming events, but you will also get automatically notified every time something gets posted at the ACA blog. So
that's right.
What's going on in your world, Jen?
Well, I want to continue the discussion we started last time I was on the show.
Right.
We actually presented a specific theist claim, which is the nobody would die for a lie claim. And I think
both you and Tracy covered that in the last
Tracy did
month.
an excellent job
and you both did an excellent job.
Well, thank you. Nailing that one. And so today, the topic that I want to discuss is certainty and the F word. And the F word I'm talking about is faith. And how faith becomes a substitute for evidence in the minds of a theist. So what happens is that theists often write to us, and they accuse us of rejecting their particular brand of religion because they can't provide us with absolute certainty or some kind of proof that what they say is true. And this is usually followed by them telling us, well, you just need to have faith, and then God will reveal himself to you. In other words, believing is seeing. And so, from my perspective, it's in fact the theists who have this almost pathological need for certainty. And they'll go to almost any length to claim it. And then when you begin presenting evidence that refutes their claims, they quickly fall back and assert that somehow faith is this prerequisite for their brand of certainty. Right.
Well, we often talk about how basically theists will come at us with this attack, like, well, you don't know for sure that something happened, but I know.
Right.
Where, they talk about the need for faith as a virtue, whereas what I call faith is basically arrogant certainty in something that you have no reason to actually know.
Right. And this, you don't know for sure. You can't prove something 100%. Well, if I claim to know something, I'm not making a claim of absolute certainty. I'm making a claim of knowledge based on a high degree of certainty. But absolute certainty, I don't think, can actually exist, except, if we're talking about philosophical questions, and we can use that in logical discussions.
Right. Well, you can have absolute certainty, but you can't really justify your absolute certainty.
Right. And the quote that I used the last time, which actually came from a blog post on the Debunking Christianity blog, was faith is being sure of things we don't know and certain of things we can't see. And that actually comes from, it's a quote from the New Testament, a paraphrase of that. It's from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, which says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." Okay.
Right. Typical evidence, typical definition of faith from the Bible, which also jives with a couple of other definitions that I like to use. The dictionary typically defines it as belief that does not rest on logical proof or material evidence.
Right.
And Mark Twain defined it as faith is believing what you know ain't so.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what happens is that we've got this conflation of faith and certainty. And this really manifests itself when we challenge theists with, and this is primarily Christians, to present evidence for their claims. And so you end up with a whole bunch of really some nonsense and some claims of knowledge that they can't possibly have, and some things that are just demonstrably false. And I've got a few quotes here. I'll give you. These are from either blog posts or actual emails that we've received at the TV list. And the first one is, as far as me personally choosing God as my supreme being and believing in the Bible and all is all caps, it says, it has is all caps. One thing about theists is that they tend to capitalize excessively when they want to emphasize a point. It has been proven and is being proven every day as they uncover by scientific means proof, all caps, in Israel and other parts of the world that every word, every story in the Bible is true. So here's a guy that's claiming that he has proof that every word and every story of the Bible is true. Well, we know that that's not true. There are some lines of evidence from archaeology and geology and biology and all kinds of stuff that directly refute claims in the Bible.
Right.
So
I would not go so far as to say that every word in the Bible is false.
Absolutely not. There are absolutely some things that are true in the Bible. Which
is kind of a logical error that theists tend to make, because they often say you have to accept either the entire Bible or none of it.
Right. Yeah, it's a very absolutist position. And it just doesn't work that way. Of course there are some things that are accurately recorded in the Bible. In fact, there's a story, and I'm going to get into this in some more detail the next time I'm on the show, but there's a story in 2 Kings chapters 24 and 25. It talks about the fall of Jerusalem. Okay, and archaeological evidence, historical evidence, and and what's in the Bible are actually pretty congruent. We know that's probably a reasonably accurate account of what happened, and so I don't have the information here in front of me, but maybe next time I'm on the show I'll give some examples of how we know that's probably true. But the same types of investigations that we use to document that that's probably true, that's probably an accurate account in the Bible, those same lines of investigation can also refute, for example, Joshua's conquest of Canaan and the Exodus as being, those didn't happen. And certainly we have evidence that the flood didn't happen.
Right. Well, part of the reasons we verify things in the Bible are because we get independent sources.
Right.
Things outside of the Bible also confirming that those same things happened. Whereas when it comes to the fact that the entire Jewish nation was enslaved by by Egypt, and then they all escaped, that's not even mentioned anywhere in Egyptian history.
Right.
And then, of course, when it comes to the flood, which has been carefully calculated to have happened exactly 4,000 something
right.
BC, or 2,000 something, but it happens to be that if you calculate that forward, there were 100 people in the entire world when the pyramids were built.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that we note is that if we go back in history, we look at some cultures were really good about keeping records, and others were not. And for example, one of the things that we kind of got bogged down in last time I was on was this whole historicity of Jesus, and there not being any extra biblical confirmation of that. And one of the things that people say was that, why would you expect the Romans to have kept a record of every crucifixion? And the answer is I wouldn't, and that's because the Romans weren't particularly good about keeping those kinds of records. However, the Egyptians, on the other hand, were very good at keeping records. They kept excellent records of who entered and left their territory along this, in the Sinai area, And so if thousands of people had been leaving that area for the Exodus, for example, that certainly would have been noted. And we have, we have records that date back to approximately the same time that the Exodus was supposed to have happened, that it makes no mention at all of thousands of people leaving.
Right. Of course, it's always possible to come up with some sort of ad hoc explanation.
Yeah.
So, like, you will hear them say things like, oh, well, they were embarrassed that all the slaves got away, and so they just sort of whitewashed that over.
Yeah.
But I mean, these are very loose standards of historical confirmation that are applied when people start with the presupposition that every single thing that is claimed in the Bible is accurate.
Well, another quote here that I got is that there will never be objective evidence proving God exists. God doesn't have to conform to our standards. We need to show him that we conform to his. You don't quite understand what it means to believe in God. It's about letting go, submitting, showing you have enough courage to admit you're a sinner, and admit that a higher being must govern your life.
You could... any cult leader would also love to have people who were that submissive.
Well, and what this is saying is that you have to reject the only reliable means that you have of discerning anything that's real in your life. The types of reason and logic that you apply to every other area of your life. You have to set that aside and pretend that you believe something, so that you can actually, have some evidence that it exists.
Right.
So I think it's just an absurd statement.
And what will often happen is that we get into an argument where the theist starts coming at us with like, okay, I've finally got the proof of God. Mm-hmm. And then they will throw a bunch of stuff at you which gets shot down. And then at some point, if they find themselves backed into the corner, they will retreat to the completely unassailable position, which is, well, your heart is hardened because you don't have enough faith.
Right.
And it's like, well, if it all comes down to a matter of faith all along, then why did you bother trying to give us reasons in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. And and here's another one. It's a real gem here. The Bible is a very reliable source. I mean, think about it. In the New Testament, they have about 10 authors, and not one of them contradicts themselves. I mean, that's a miracle on its own. So, of course, the Bible is reliable. And historians believe that 99.6% of the historical events in the Bible, in the New Testament, are true. 99.6%.
Well,
I mean, that's almost as good as Ivory soap.
I remember on my last show, the last time I was here a month ago, we had a guy who would throw out random statistics like that. He would be like, he kept saying things like, okay, well, how come 95% of all near-death experiences result in conversions? And it's like, where did you find this figure? And he says, well, it's probably about that. I think there's some kind of fallacy involving too much accuracy in numbers you're making up off the top of your head. Yeah,
in fact, after I think about it, that's actually better than Ivory soap, because I think Ivory soap only claimed 99 and 44/100% pure, so 99.6 that's better than Ivory soap. And then this last one here: all atheists are pessimists who swear by objective evidence. Doubt is your life.
Apart from the pessimist part, I totally cop to that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what's the problem there. So anyway, part of the reason that people make some of these statements, some of them actually result from overestimating the strength of the evidence that supports their position, and they get some of this from really bad apologetics. I've seen a lot of references on different blog posts and everything to Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel, and people like that. And so it's really just, they've just not investigated the claims enough, and so they believe they have a basis for assuming that this evidence is stronger than it is. And the other thing is that they have this willingness to ignore or distort evidence that actually contradicts their position. And an example of this are the young Earth creationists who really, really need for radiometric dating to be inaccurate in order for them to sustain a claim that the Earth is between 6 and 10,000 years old. If radiometric dating is accurate, and it is, then they have a problem. And so they are willing to distort that evidence in order to make that claim stick.
I don't know that they consciously distort it. They most people who cite radiometric dating don't have any clue what they're talking about.
Right, but they're...
And so are willing to latch on to anyone who sounds like an authority figure. And sometimes they're people who are creationists and maybe are distorting the evidence. And other times it's just like a snippet of a potential objection to, a genuine objection to some particular application of radiometric dating, which they then overgeneralize.
Well, actually, there's some people who work for, like, Discovery Institute, and I think there's some kind of creationist university that the Institute for Creation Research operates.
I don't think you could call that a university with a straight face.
I say that very loosely.
I think it's probably a storefront.
Yeah, but they claim to award PhDs and stuff. But anyway, there are people who have actually written, thesis and dissertations on radiometric dating, claiming that it's inaccurate. So I would say that those people, either they are incompetent or they are deliberately distorting the evidence, because I don't think you can be competent and honest and still claim that radiometric dating is accurate.
Right. Now, people might fairly ask, aren't you just dismissing everything that comes out of the Institute for Creation Research because you don't like what they're saying? And there is an actual standard which you have to deal with in science, which is basically going through a peer review process, right, where basically there's sort of, an established way to become an expert, which is to become a PhD through an accredited school. And then when you have an idea, you don't just write it in a book like a lot of creationists do, or put it up on a website and say, here's my idea. You have to throw it at a peer-reviewed scientific journal with some people who have credentials, and it has to undergo that process of criticism. I mean, this person earlier said, doubt is your life.
Yeah.
That describes science. I mean, if an idea hasn't been fairly and reasonably subjected to a certain amount of routine doubt, then it's not considered to be part of mainstream science. And that's the kind of thing that you will see when you find somebody who has initials after their name from, like, a diploma mill or the Creation Research Institute saying, well, I say that there's problems with radiometric dating. Mm-hmm. Try to find that in the peer-reviewed literature, and you can't.
Yeah. The second example I have is actually fairly recent here. Ray Comfort's claims, he recently wrote a 50-page introduction to Darwin's Origin of Species that he's supposed to be handing out on college campuses. And in it, he makes some claims about the impossibility of getting from 24 pairs of chromosomes in the great apes to the 23 pairs in humans. And he ignores the evidence, which I'm sure that this has been presented to him before, about the evidence that chromosome 2 fused. And that's how we ended up with 23 pairs instead of the 24 that the great apes, and stunning evidence for a common ancestor. But he has to ignore that, and he does. And like I said, I'm sure that someone at some point has presented him with this evidence, and he still chooses to ignore it. So I put that in the category of dishonesty.
I've read Ray's book, and he has a limitless capacity to repeat things over and over again that have been explained to him already. Yeah. So some of that, like I said, it's overstating the strength of evidence and a willingness to ignore and distort evidence. And some of it is just this really appalling ignorance about certain subjects that probably should have been covered in a high school science class. And to illustrate that, I got an email from a very confused, and I might add, arrogant and belligerent theist who wrote to us this past week. And in it, this is just part of what he wrote, but he says, in just 6.5 billion years, how could your body's cells develop and place themselves in functional design
that repairs itself when damaged and lives upwards of 70 years. Is that logical? And then he goes on to say, what about mutation? It's usually fatal. What are the chances it just happened to work the first time?
It's usually fail?
Fatal.
Oh, fatal.
Yeah, fatal.
I thought he was like talking NetSpeak or something.
Yeah.
It's fail. It's
Sorry,
epic fail.
Is there any scientific or mathematical explanation for how so many things developed in such a relatively short amount of time? And then he goes on to say, multiply that by 2. It takes 2 humans to reproduce. What if both of these accidental people are male or female? Uh-oh, that simply does not work.
What?
So you see, there's just a host of complete misunderstandings and gross ignorance about what the science actually says. And I actually wrote back to him and I said, on one point we agree. Because he made a further point that he didn't think the Earth was actually 6.5 billion years old. And I said, well, on that point we agree. Because the evidence says it's 4.55 billion years old, plus or minus 1%. So...
And, I mean, if you're going to make this kind of argument, have enough respect for yourself to look stuff up. Because, I mean, one thing I've learned after arguing with theists all the time is that I should often... I mean, it's important to override your impulse to just say the first thing that pops into your head and dismiss it as stupid. Because often you will look stupid by saying things that they don't say. And it's worth the extra effort because the internet makes this really, really easy to go up and look at what the science you're arguing about says.
Yeah, and...
I mean, because the difference between 6 billion and 4 billion years is really big.
Yeah. And so, we've got, like I said, this gross... And it's almost a willful ignorance because... Every point that he made, you can look that up and find out all kinds of information on, things like, where did sex come from? I'm not talking about, the act. I'm talking about the 2 sexes. How come we have 2? Why not 3? Why not just 1? And the answer is, of course, some species do have just 1. So this claim that you got to have a male and a female all the time is actually not true. So,
That's one of Ray Comfort's favorites, too.
Oh, yeah, I know. And I especially like his assumption that male is the default.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
It's like, okay, there's some problems here, bud. But,
actually, I remember I was just talking on the Bat Cruise last night to somebody about the similarity between evolution of species and evolution of languages. Mm-hmm. And one of the comments I made was, or one of us made, was that when you ask, like Ray Comfort will ask, okay, let's say that a giraffe evolved for the first time. Who did the giraffe mate with? And then that's kind of like saying, when the first English speaker appeared, who did he talk to?
Right.
Because he would assume that the first English speaker happened to be living in a society where everybody else spoke Latin or German or something, and he just happened to develop a mutation where everything he was saying all of a sudden was completely incomprehensible to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. So we have, like I said, ignorance. We can correct that with education. The willful part of it, that borders on character flaw stuff. So I'm not sure we can fix that. But sometimes it's just a refusal to even consider contradictory evidence. And actually, William Lane Craig gives us a pretty good example of that with his self-authenticating witness of the Holy Spirit. And in this, he says, the witness or testimony of the Holy Spirit is its own proof. It is unmistakable. It does not need other proofs to back it up. It is self-evident and attests to its own truth. So he's saying that he has this feeling that he believes that he gets from the Holy Spirit, that this is all true. And because of that, he doesn't need any other proof. Now, of course, he engages in lots of apologetics in an attempt to, demonstrate this with evidence. He admits those are arguments, and he's just trying to convert people who haven't yet experienced this self-authenticating witness of the Holy Spirit. But, if you've got someone like that who is willing to reject all evidence because, in his view, if Christianity was false, he wouldn't have this feeling. And because he has this feeling, therefore it's true. There's no point in even engaging someone like that. They're bulletproof. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. And you have...
I'm just as happy getting to callers.
Let's go ahead and get to the callers. I think we've got them stacked up here.
Well, we're going to need a few seconds to get somebody queued up. But yeah, I one of the things that I often notice as a frustration when arguing with Christians is that they use these sort of self-validating beliefs a lot, where they start with assuming that something is true, and then anything they find that can agree with them, they not only quote, but they also play it up. So like I remember listening to the late Kent Hovind. D. James Kennedy. Kent Hovind's still alive, but in jail.
Yeah.
D. James Kennedy had this radio show that I used to listen to all the time, and I noticed that whenever he would cite an expert, he would always say, like, let me quote the words of so-and-so, who was the foremost expert on biology in the world.
Yeah.
And it would be like, I never heard of this guy, and I'm not really a layman. And you remember Anthony Flew?
I was just going to bring him up
when he became
the most prominent atheist
right.
ever. Yeah.
And it was like, I gather that he was pretty well known in philosophical circles, but I've been an atheist for a long time, and I hadn't heard of him.
Yeah. Yeah, but his conversion to some brand of deism, as far as I can tell, has been trumpeted as a victory for the theists.
Right. Have we got a call up? Okay, Matthew from Ohio. Are you there?
Yeah, hey.
Matthew?
Yep. How's it going?
Hi.
Okay, we got you now.
All right. I finally came out to my parents today, and they didn't really take it so well.
How old are you?
I'm 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, they forced me to have a conversation with my priest after church.
Did you win?
While I was having this discussion, most of his arguments were easily refuted, except one. He said, how can you deny the existence of God when God created Howard Stern's penis? Please discuss.
I think that was a prank call.
Yeah, probably so.
Okay. Do we have another one? So yeah, I'm skimming over a post that I wrote in 2005. Just basically, you mentioned Josh McDowell a minute ago, and Josh McDowell had this incredibly ironic quote that I read somewhere, which was, but you hear this a lot from Christians denouncing postmodernism. They'll say, some people today would say that there is no true reality, only perceptions and opinions. Today we often hear phrases like, that may be true for you, but it's not true for me. To those that hold that there is no absolute truth, truth is seen as nothing more than a personal preference or a perception, and therefore cannot extend beyond a person's boundaries. And the reason I find this ironic is because Christian apologists will accuse atheists of doing this all the time, whereas when they're cornered, like I said a minute ago, they will retreat to a position of, you can't understand it because you don't have the right kind of faith.
Right. Yeah, it almost reminds me of this Gnostic claim that they have this secret knowledge, that if we had this knowledge, we would believe as they do.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm being informed by the call screener, who is Matt today, that prank callers get removed from the contact list permanently and reported to Skype as abuse. I'd also mention for the record that I think Howard Stern's penis is actually proof that there is no God, as he claims, as he makes terrible claims about its diminutiveness all the time. Poor Howard. Okay, so we have Nicholas from Michigan next.
Yes, hello. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Hey, it's really great to be on. I really enjoy the show.
Oh, glad. Thanks for calling.
But I figure you guys are pretty much up on popular science. I wasn't so sure about literature and literary criticism. Do you know anything about current trends? You were talking a moment ago about postmodernism, and that has a lot to do with what's going on in literary criticism today.
Well, it's been going on. I mean, postmodernism has been around for several decades.
Yeah.
Right.
What about it?
Well, first of all, do you know anything about literary criticism, or do you have any interest?
I'm not real good with. I mean, like I have the same kind of passing interest in literature that I do in science. Not being a scientist, maybe more toward the science side.
Yeah,
but,
same here.
Okay.
I don't have any specific knowledge about it.
Okay. Well, the reason why I bring it up is because there's this somewhat new field called literary Darwinism, and it takes on different names like literary Darwinism or biopoetics. And basically, the underlying foundation is that they're trying to bring in aspects of the natural sciences and then apply them to literature or the arts more generally.
That actually sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
It is really interesting. Part of it relies on evolutionary psychology. So you're looking at authors like Dawkins and Pinker, and you're looking at various things they can find in evolutionary history and seeing if you can apply that to characters, to readers, to authors, and to works of art.
Right, like one of the most basic things that evolutionary psychology covers is why, for instance, like it's easier and generally more socially acceptable for a man to go cheating on his spouse than for a woman, and so a lot of literary themes involve like secret rendezvous with with wives of very rich but annoying people.
Right. Well, one of the first studies was done on Pride and Prejudice, and it was a relatively straightforward study. It looked at how Austen, who wrote the novel, is talking with her readers about mate selection, kin favoring, just your basic straightforward things you would expect to see in a species that is always trying to reproduce and to protect itself from predators. But the field has really moved on from there more to the cognitive approach. I'm in film, and so a lot of the film studies I've been reading are using cognitive film studies, which is a little bit to do with evolution, but it also has to do with neuroscience and the way we think from a scientific point of view. And actually, the reason why I wanted to bring this up to you guys, I know it's not so much in your regular line of callers, but the reason why I like this so much, this literary Darwinism so much, is that the underlying foundation of it all is that we are able to take apart various aspects of human life, of our species, and are ultimately reducible to physical forms, to what Dennett calls the cranes rather than the skyhooks.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay, yeah.
So are there any like major advances in science or in literary criticism? I mean, are there any special insights that are claimed from having applied this evolutionary psychology to literature that nobody ever thought of before?
You mean in regards to the work itself, or just in regards to evolutionary science?
More in regards to the work itself.
Well,
or are you saying that they think that the literature can actually give reciprocal insight into getting the science right?
Well, the idea is that most of the literary theory of the past 50 or 60 years has focused exclusively on cultural factors like nurture rather than nature. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the evolutionary literary theorists are arguing not to exclude culture, but just to include nature, to include biology and evolution. So they're not necessarily trying to remove anything; they're just trying to add something.
Okay. So it's sort of like applying some ideas from evolutionary biology to literary criticism.
Right, it's evolutionary biology, cognitive and neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, just various elements of what we know about the human developmental process, how the brain works, just various things that are involved, physical and mental capabilities that are involved when you're experiencing a work of art, such as a film or reading a book. To answer the question, I kind of evaded the question before. You said, have any advances been made? It's not so much tremendous advances. There's still a lot of debate going on whether or not this approach is reductionist or if we should do it at all. A big one is if we should only focus on culture and not at all do the biology.
Right. Well, my understanding about evolutionary psychology, even though I personally think it's cool, is that even amongst biologists, it's basically taken with a lot of grains of salt.
Right.
Well,
that's one of the things I was worried about. I'm writing my thesis on this, and I'm just doing research on it.
Okay.
And that's one of the aspects that I need to look more into.
Yeah, I think that with evolutionary psychology, you have to be really careful because it's a relatively young discipline, and so there's an awful lot of crap out there that you find in evolutionary psychology. And then once in a while you come across some stuff that's really, really cool, like Pinker's work is really cool. And there's another guy, Robert Sapolsky. I think he's a professor out in Stanford or maybe Berkeley. I can't remember which. But he's got lots of cool stuff out there. So you might want to take a look at some of his work too.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. All right, well,
and
thanks for
like
going.
I said, I really enjoyed the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see.
We have another caller queued up.
In a second.
All right.
Sorry for this.
Yeah.
Leroy from Massachusetts, are you there? Leroy?
Hello?
Leroy! Only Warcraft geeks will get that. I don't hear him.
Yeah.
Does he know he's on?
Leroy, if you're on, talk to us.
Well, anyway, let's see. Between
I'm
this...
back.
Oh, wait.
Okay,
Leroy,
he's
are you
back.
there?
Yeah, my microphone was messed up. Hold on.
Oh, that's okay.
Alright, what's good, guys? Well, I've noticed that, specifically among African Americans, not many of us are atheists. I just kind of find that odd. I mean, what is this? All my friends, they be going to church when I'm just sitting there playing Madden 08. I ain't got nobody to talk to, and any thoughts on that? Any reasons why?
I don't know. We've had...
I mean, there are a few very prominent black atheists,
Yeah.
like Reginald Finley, the infidel guy.
We've had a few, black atheists show up at some of the ACA events, but I don't know why they don't seem to stay engaged for very long. I wish they would.
I mean, I understand that there are particular, I'm not that familiar with the culture, but I mean, there's a particular strain of churchgoers in the black community that, I mean, I'm not even sure I want to speculate on this as a white guy.
No, you know what? No, I wouldn't be offended at all. But I think one of the reasons why is, with segregation and stuff, they just had to pray about it because there wasn't much else they could do, and yeah.
Well, and I think that if you look back at the history of the civil rights movement, you had, especially in the South, where Martin Luther King, had such a huge influence. He was a minister, and
he was working for God.
What's that?
He was doing all this stuff in the name of God.
Yeah. And the thing
I
about
guess that's
that
one
is,
of the good things religion has brought us.
Yeah, and I had a discussion.
Although I wouldn't say that religion brought it.
Yeah,
I would just say that it happened to be intertwined.
And see, I was having a discussion one time with a guy who happened to be African American, and we were talking about. He said, "Who do you think had a bigger influence on civil rights for African Americans? Was it Malcolm X or Martin Luther King?" And I said, "Well, from my perspective as someone from the South, it was definitely Martin Luther King, because not that their intent was all that different, but their method and their people's perception of them was very different. Martin Luther King came from the church, and people in the South, for better or for worse, mostly I think for worse, tend to be more religious than lots of other parts of the country, and so that whole connection to the church played better in the South than it did elsewhere. And then, of course, the church bombing in Birmingham certainly didn't help the segregationist cause. So I think that this idea of that in the African American community, that the church is sort of a source of community, and that, I don't know, in some respects I almost think people believe they owe a debt to the church in some sense.
Actually, I think I do have another insight based on something that I've heard mentioned before about black women, which is that I've heard several black women, like prominent commentators, say that it is doubly difficult to be in that position because you get all the discrimination against, all the sort of unconscious racism added to all the unconscious sexism. So it's like, it's like being a member of multiple minorities makes it that much harder to fit in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And so,
actually.
there are a lot of different persecuted minorities, and some of them it's kind. I mean, like if you're black or you're a woman, then you have the outward appearance. But let's say if you're an atheist or if you're gay, you have the choice to reveal that to the world or not. And when you do reveal that to the world, I mean, like, there's sort of an uncomfortable alliance between, let's say, atheists and gays, because while there is common cause in opposing religious oppression, there's also this concern, like among gay people, let's say, that says, well, we're already gay. I mean, do we want the stigma of being associated with atheism also? And I imagine that there might be sort of a similar hesitation when it comes to the black community also. What do you think?
Well, I definitely think all that makes sense, but I actually gotta go soon. I think I gotta go mess.
He's not fucking quicker than me.
Yeah.
No, and also he didn't really sound black.
Yeah.
But we took him seriously anyway, and now he'll be reported to Skype, and we got a good discussion out of it.
Well, and even though he turned out to be a prank caller, it's actually
it's a good question.
It's an important question, and the answer is I don't know why there aren't more black atheists. I think we can probably speculate on any number of reasons, but
right.
I think maybe we should ask a black atheist.
Maybe we should call in Reggie sometime.
Yeah, we'll call Reggie. Okay.
So
we have Craig in California.
He's
yes.
not highlighted yet. Oh, hey,
There we go.
Craig.
There, I'm here. Oh, yeah, and this week's example of religion not being as moral as it says it is anencephalic babies. Religion says we can't harvest their organs until they're already dead, even though they have no cerebrum. Does this make sense? I don't think so. That was this week's example of religion not being as moral as it says it is, and
atheism being more moral than the religious people would ever give us credit for. Well, thank you.
Was this from a news article or something?
Oh, no, it's not a current news article.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Just what's been going on over the last few years. Everything, examples like
Baby K. Do you know about Baby K? That was an example of an anencephalic baby that was kept alive at the request of her religious mother for 2 years.
Oh yeah, I think I remember.
You really can't. There was no hope of this, child ever, growing up, and no hope of this child ever gaining consciousness. And it cost the taxpayers, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there are other examples, like parents who wanted to donate the organs of anencephalic babies, because only baby-sized organs can fit into babies, that have problems, but with brains. But you can't legally harvest the organs from an anencephalic baby, even with the permission of the parents, who realize it's a hopeless cause until after the baby is clinically dead. It's been cases like that. There have been, cases of parents who want to donate organs. There's been the Baby K incident, and so not specifically in the news this week.
Okay, thanks for calling.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I do remember that case. It was really kind of sad, and actually, I think that in the case where children are just catastrophically ill, like that, or in case of babies that are born with devastating problems, I think that we probably should defer to the parents as far as how long they need to keep this child alive, and let them come to terms with it. I don't think that the government should step in and pull the plug on the kid.
Well, I'm not sure anybody is talking about the government stepping in and pulling.
Yeah, but he was talking about Baby K, where they took extraordinary measures to keep this child alive for 2 years, and short of getting the mother some serious psychiatric help, I don't know what else you could have done.
Right. So next up we have Dawn from Toronto. Are you there?
Hello?
I missed multiple phone lines at the studio.
Oh, yeah. Just go to the next line there.
Right. So, I don't know. We could talk about, Aaron K's shtick for a little bit or something.
Oh.
Or, I don't know. Do we care about Aaron K enough
Not
to
too
even
much.
do that? Not very much.
Okay, we've got Adam in San Francisco.
Adam in San Francisco. Are
Hello?
you there?
Can you guys hear me?
Hi.
I can.
Yes.
Hello?
Okay. I wanted to kind of follow up on that black atheism because.
Are you a black atheist?
Well, I'm biracial, but
Okay.
I pretty much identify as black because I look mostly black. So anyway,
Okay.
but there's kind of 2 points on it, and that is that I think that during slavery times that the role of religion really was the only way that they could, have a culture and bond socially. And so it became a deep-seated cultural thing for African Americans particularly. And then again, continuing through Reconstruction too, because obviously persecuted people try to, bond together. And then the other thing is that, as we all know, atheism generally correlates to educational attainment. And I think since, unfortunately, blacks are underrepresented in academics and don't necessarily have equal access to education, that kind of leaves a certain void in the black community that the church can kind of swoop in and say, well, you're not going to have opportunities here, but we'll bring you under the wing of the church. And I don't know, I think it kind of spirals in that sense. What do you guys think? Does that make sense?
Right. Well, I mean, I've read that in a lot of cases, the problem of minority groups tending to be poor and uneducated can be sort of self-perpetuating because, in the first place, they can grow up in families where education is undervalued, and in the second place, people make assumptions about them, snap judgments based on looking at them that tend to pigeonhole them in unfair ways and make it more difficult to get ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's statistical discrimination. judging, like saying, thinking that all black people are uneducated because statistically more black people are uneducated.
Well, and the other thing is that, if you look at the demographics of who's an atheist and who's a believer, women are much more likely to be believers than men. And that's true of a lot of things. It's not just religion. It's also things like, the women are more likely to read astrology columns and believe in ghosts and all kinds of stuff. It's some really interesting stuff on, who believes which claims. I'm not sure why that is, but given that and the fact that within the black community there's a higher percentage of female-headed households, it makes sense that if believers are more likely to be women, and there's a higher percentage of women who are heads of households in the black community, then obviously they're probably going to take their kids to church. And one of the things that happens with church is that you indoctrinate the young, and then that sort of takes hold of somebody from early on. And so I think it's sort of a self-perpetuating phenomenon.
I mean,
yeah, I agree with that.
There is periodic discussion about how atheist groups tend to be dominated by white guys, like let's say politicians also tend to be dominated by white guys. I don't think that atheism has like a barrier to entry like politics, but I've also heard the same sort of thing. I mean, I happen to be atheist and a liberal, and I read Daily Kos, for instance, and I see a lot of commentary about how when they get together, they wind up being a lot of white guys also. And I'm not sure if it's just like activism or, I mean, what it is, because I don't think that there's like a significant mental difference that would prevent women or black people from getting into that kind of activism or atheism. But I mean,
maybe it's the religion acts kind of as like a safety blanket, so that because being an activist, you kind of have to put yourself out there and take some risks and maybe say some questionable things that people won't like. Whereas with religion, you just kind of sit down and be quiet and just let the preacher boost your spirits, And
if you are an activist in your church, it's socially acceptable. Even for women to be very active in their church, especially sometimes for women to be active in their church. So, there's a way to actively participate in a community and get rewarded for it. Versus being an atheist where you may, depending on what community you're in, you may actually have some problems.
Yeah, well, those were the thoughts I wanted to share. So, love the show, and have a good day.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Interesting topic, and in fact, we have a couple more callers lined up who'd like to talk about black atheism, so that could become the unofficial topic of the show today.
Yeah.
We have Sean in Chicago coming up. I'm not sure he's queued up yet.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good.
All right. I figured I could weigh in on this issue because I'm black and Hispanic actually, and I grew up. I mean, the black side of my family is like Southern Baptist, came from Mississippi, migrated up and everything, and like my grandmother is a huge religious person, and one of the big stories that goes back with my whole, I don't want to tell my whole backstory, but with my grandmother, we had a falling out because I was talking to her about religion and everything, and we had several conversations, and in one conversation she told me about how she basically pretty much kicked somebody out because she found out they were a Mormon. And when in a subsequent conversation that we had, I told her... Well,
who can blame her for that?
Yeah. in a subsequent conversation I had, I told her that religion is divisive, and she didn't want to admit to that. But it in all my life, I used to go to a Black Baptist church, and the thing about it is like the previous caller was saying, there is a bit of there's a bit of like, us versus them mentality that black people have, or a large portion of black people. And like even on my YouTube channel, I'm Maverick713, and there's guys on there. There's a guy that's not even black. He's like Egyptian or something like that. I got a couple of people who are telling me that I'm not black enough, and I sat down and I thought about it, and I'm making a video about it right now. But it forced me to think about the idea that, what exactly does make you qualify as being black enough? And I said, what? Because when I speak, I don't speak with slang. I don't use the N-word really. I don't do most. When people hear me, they don't assume that I'm black, because there is, a certain percentage of the population where you could kind of assume either not that they're black, but where they came from, whether they came from the South, whether they came from, the hood, or whether they came from, the suburbs. And I happened to grow up in the hood, but I also happened to, go to a school that was far away from neighborhoods like that. And I happened to excel with the English language, and so I have a good command of it, and I happen to speak it correctly. But
I've run into something similar myself recently, because I was in an online discussion. I come from a Jewish background, and I had a discussion with somebody who considered herself a very serious Jew, and was saying, you shouldn't say that you're Jewish because you don't take the Jewish culture seriously enough. It really is kind of a self-identification issue, or sort of a state of mind, where, it's not just skin tone in your case.
Right.
It's also the way you present yourself.
Exactly, yeah. At the same time, like when I'm in Chicago driving around, I don't have to worry about being pulled over, and if I do, I don't have to worry about getting the full search and seizure like they do to some people, just because of how they look, or because of the kind of music that's playing out of their car. There's a lot of profiling going on, and of course, obviously that's not right, but it doesn't happen to me because I don't seem to fall into that kind of ghetto black, I guess, archetype that's probably the best way I could explain it,
Yeah, and this whole not black enough, accusation. I've always been fascinated by this, because it's just such a blatant attempt at controlling someone, and in my mind, it's like, what does that actually mean? I'm not really sure. I can even define what that means, other than, like you said, that you don't act like one of us anymore. That sort of
Exactly. It's like you're not like one of us anymore. Once you stop acting like that, once you, because when I was really, really young, I'm pretty sure that there was a part of me that was like ghetto, because I grew up in Cabrini Green, which is it was almost 100% black people, and there's a low education level there, so it seems like when I was younger, yeah, but when I started going to school, and I went to a magnet school that was, in the good part of town, and I went to school with mostly well-to-do children, so my language changed, and that's the same way. Like, my best friend is Jewish, but he grew up on the South Side with a bunch of black kids. So when we ride around in his car, there's usually like, NWA playing or something like that. When we ride around in my car, there's usually, like classical music or progressive talk radio. So it's really more of a culture thing for me. And it doesn't bother me, when people tell me I'm not black enough, it doesn't bother me in the least bit, because I don't really, we were talking about this with my friends, what race am I? I'm a human race. We were talking about forms when you fill them out. I don't even fill out that part if I don't have to, or I'll check as many as I feel I need to, because one, I don't really want to identify myself as a race. We're all biologically the same. So there really isn't anything to the whole race thing. Race is culture, and it's a mental construct. And with black people, there is a whole lot of, if you're not doing the things we're doing, because I've had lots of debates with black people, and there'll be some people who are saying, you know what, and this is not only black people that do this, but they do this a lot. When they say, don't listen to this person. He's the devil. He's, don't even listen to him. I don't want to hear anything you have to say because you said you don't believe in God. So beyond that, you're obviously the devil. You obviously have no morals. And I mean, I don't think, and obviously that's not something that just sticks to black people, but it is something that I see a lot of black people implementing as a technique to try to get you away. They don't want you to even talk about it. And my dad's the same way. I mean,
it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about religious faith functioning to sort of self-reinforce beliefs that you already have by saying, okay, not only do I have this religious faith, but I will elevate anyone who agrees with me and immediately denounce with no good cause anybody who disagrees.
Yeah, it's kind of like the conspiracy theorist. It's like everything that's inside my bubble is real. And even if you show me 100% positive evidence, I'm going to say somebody outside of the bubble that is in control of the conspiracy is doing this. So that's why I can't believe that, because you can't trust this person because it goes against what I say or what I believe.
Right.
Well, you know what? We've got, I think, 6 callers stacked up here. So,
all right, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for letting me weigh in.
Thank you very much for the call.
Yeah, very insightful. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
So, have we got Jarek in Fort Collins? Apparently not.
And we're getting calls from all over the U.S. today, so that's good.
And some days we just get different calls from all over the world. But now I suppose we have Jarek in Fort Collins. Are you there, Jarek?
Oh, yes, I am. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Good. You can hear me. I was kind of wondering. I've never really used the Skype before.
We couldn't a minute ago, but now you're fine.
Yep.
So what's on your mind? Uh-oh.
Well, I got, I'm getting a little back,
close the program because there's going to be a delay between what you hear on the show and what you hear over Skype.
So I should probably just close this off, right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about how the other day I was bringing up the black atheists and how the numbers are so low.
I'm sorry. Hello?
Hello?
Oh. All right, okay. I'm sorry we couldn't talk to Jarek. There were too many audio problems on that one.
Yeah.
But this seems like a good time to break and make some announcements. Jarek and anyone else who doesn't manage to call, feel free to email tv@atheist-community.org. And the show is over in 22 minutes, and that ends at 6 o'clock. And starting at 6:30, we expect to be heading on down to Plucker's Wing Bar in North Austin. So come on over and join us if you're here. And for a reminder for those people who tuned in late, there's probably too many people ahead of you now, but if you want to call in, what you have to do is log into Skype and add Atheist TV as a contact and message them to tell them what you would like to talk about.
And I should note, I wanted to say thanks to our prank callers for actually inspiring a good discussion here.
Yeah, I know. It must be extremely frustrating for them to try to get a rise out of us and find out that they've kicked off a really fascinating topic.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
So we have Matt. No, not yet.
No, we don't have.
Nope.
Okay.
Not yet. Okay.
We do. We have somebody. We have Miriam.
Miriam in Michigan.
Miriam in Michigan.
Hi.
Hello? Hi.
I'm going to break the black atheism chain.
Oh, that's all right.
Black.
Okay.
But I have something that I'm looking for advice on. I'm trying to start a sort of secular discussion group, debate group at my school, but all my attempts have failed. Do you have anything that any suggestions for how to get this started?
Does your school already have a debate team, like, that goes out and does, like, National Forensic League stuff?
Well, we have forensics, but I wanted to make it sort of focused on religion and Yeah.
Right. I mean, I understand that. I just wonder. I mean, first of all, if you've got that kind of debate group, then my experience in high school was that that hanging out with those people, you could get into all kinds of arguments just spontaneously without even going through official channels. And the thing is, when in that sort of organization, you might run into students and teachers who just like to argue, and you'll find a lot of atheists who could be potential allies in that group. My other question was going to be, do you know any teachers or authority figures in the school who might be sympathetic, and have you tried talking to them about it?
Well, I've talked to the teacher who would be my faculty advisor, but and he's very nice about it. He's been a great help, but he just hasn't given me any suggestions about how to get more people.
Yeah, one of the things that you might want to do. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Secular Student Alliance.
No.
Okay. Here's what you do: contact the Secular Coalition for America. In fact, their new executive director, Sean Faircloth, was here in Austin last week, and we attended a lecture that he gave at the Ethical Society of Austin. And one of his goals is get more students involved, get more student groups out there. So, tell you what you do. If you email us at tv@atheist-experience, or no.
TV at atheist-experience. No. Community.
Yeah, we'll get this. The TV list is.
We don't email ourselves.
It's on the
apparently
screen
on your screen, but not ours.
Anyways.
Oh, yeah. I got it.
Okay.
Atheist-community.org.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Too many email addresses.
Anyway, if you email us at that address, I'll send you a link to Secular Community or Secular Coalition for America.
That's not Center for Inquiry's student group, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, this is something that's specific to Secular Coalition for America.
All right.
And so anyway, we'll get you connected. They've got actually, I guess, some information for student groups and some advice, so it might be helpful for you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Sure thing.
Okay.
Is Jarek back? Jarek, are you there? No.
No.
Okay. Head gestures. Let's see here.
Okay. Yeah.
Disconnect one call.
Okay.
Gotcha.
No, the student group thing is kind of a difficult issue because you've got at least every 4 years, and often more frequently, you've got a complete turnover of people in the group. And the success or failure of the group is largely contingent on the commitment of the leaders. So it's tough to sustain some momentum with a student group.
Yeah, especially since the students have an unfortunate tendency to graduate.
Yeah, and then they go off and
it is kind of the death of many
away,
active groups on campuses.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties over here.
We're used to that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to speak on how that guy was mentioning that there's a low average number of African American atheists, and I think that's pretty much attributed to the lack of community that there is between different atheist groups, and how these churches, they kind of facilitate that kind of feeling of togetherness. So whether people are specifically religious or not, they go to church just to kind of feel in the community.
Well,
yeah, that's true. There are like scattered pockets of atheist groups, but they tend to be sort of small and like herding cats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But and also with student groups, I mean, that's what, whenever I first moved here, man, there's I think 37 religious clubs on our campus. I was just looking for somebody, for a community, just somebody to get together with and talk and just talk about things, some like-minded people.
Well,
couldn't find anything.
In Fort Collins, Colorado, you're like not that far from the epicenter of Christianity.
Yeah, you can't swing a dead cat in this town without hitting a church. It's crazy. But yeah, once we got it
Plus,
going,
swinging dead cats and hitting churches with them is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a good fun-filled afternoon. Let me tell you. But yeah, so that's what I did was I was like, went and had a couple beers with a friend of mine, and we were like, you know what, let's start up a student group. Let's go ahead and do it, just to and it just took off from there. I mean, tons of professors have backed us up. People just in the community have shown their support, and we have almost like 100 members. And I started this in late August, something like that. So it's in like the month or two that it started. We have Victor Stinger. He's going to come here in early October, come speak at our campus about his new book, The New Atheism.
Yeah, we've talked to him before.
Yeah,
he's coming to see us too.
Oh, well, good deal. I will tell him I said hi.
Okay.
One of the things...
kind of facilitate this kind of community group for these people here and run it in the community and be like, hey, you know what, there's a group here. You can come hang out with us, talk with us. We all kind of need this feeling. So,
well, I tell you what, to help out some of these other student groups, can you email us at the TV list and tell us how you did it?
Yeah. I'll tell you right now. It's Secular Student Alliance and Center for Inquiry. They're one of the two major.
Okay. There you go. So.
All right. So now
they have speakers. They'll help us planning. All sorts of stuff. They've been a really big help for us.
Okay, Miriam, take note. That is apparently a very successful avenue. And one of the things that I always observe is that in the emails we get, there's just kind of like a craving to get involved in something like this. There is a lot of not just there isn't any good atheist community for me around here, but like. I didn't even know that I was not the only person in the world who felt this way.
Yeah.
And so, it could happen that when you start your group, people will just jump on it because they've been waiting for this kind of sense of belonging to a group that has these similar beliefs.
Yeah, certainly. That was one of the biggest things whenever we started, advertising. People just came out of the woodwork. We have people that are 80 years old down to, students and high school students that come to join us and just be like, before, same thing with me and the other guy that I started this with. We just thought we were the only ones, didn't have anybody to discuss this with. Even my wife, she's, from Europe, but she's, Orthodox, more, kind of religious, I guess. So a lot of these things I don't really discuss with her either. Religion doesn't really come up, but it's just not having anybody to facilitate a discussion with or anybody like-minded to put your views and bounce back and forth with. It's hard. So that's one of the things that I see as far as this religious community. Yeah, they have people that they'll help you out when you're sick. They'll take care of your kids. All this stuff like that. And with atheists, we don't really have that. We have everybody's so kind of skeptical. So it's kind of, and a lot of people believe in different way or not believe in different ways. So it is kind of hard to find that kind of group to talk with. So but once you started, it was. Like I said, it's taken off like a wildfire. So if anybody lives around here in Fort Collins, we're going to have a blasphemy day. We're going to do some debaptisms for people. So it's going to be lots of fun.
How do you do that? Do you use a blow dryer to remove water? Or
Yes. Yeah, I have a certificate that they can sign off saying they're officially debaptized, and I'm going to have a hair dryer and debaptize them in the name of science and reason.
Great.
It will be fun. Yeah, we're going to have a free speech. People can come up and talk for 90 seconds, say whatever you want. Whatever. It doesn't have to be anti-religious or anything like that. Come say whatever you would like.
Well, congratulations. Keep it up.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
And let me say, y'all's show is one of the best ones that I've heard by far. I plug your show and also the Iron Chariots Wikipedia. That is a great resource for us for discussion topics. Believe me.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Y'all keep up the good work.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
All right.
For people who didn't know the other thing he was talking about, ironchariots.org, Matt and I and a nonprofits listener set up this website a couple of years ago where it's basically a filtered Wikipedia that is specifically for the purpose of setting up like counter-apologetic arguments. And in fact, you last night said that you were wanting to have a site where you could sort of consolidate all these arguments, and I said, well, you should check out Iron Chariots.
Yeah, I know, and I knew about Iron Chariots, and I actually have a password to get on there and post and everything, and I just don't ever have time. Oh yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, Matt just told me he'll make me an admin, so
Cool.
that'd be cool. All right, so yeah.
Okay, we got Matt in Arizona. Are you there, Matt?
Hello, I'm here. So
Hi.
can you guys hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
All right. So I just figured I'd bring us back to what you were talking about at the beginning of the show with radiometric dating and evidence.
Yes.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
So this will give people to talk about things to talk about when they make their groups. So with radiometric dating, I'm not quite sure why that's really any sort of proof against God. Presumably, when God created Adam and Eve, they had a garden to live in, correct?
What?
So with
Say that again?
radiometric dating, hello?
Yeah.
Can you say that again? You were a little quiet there.
Okay. Sorry, I'm talking on an iPhone, and I'm not quite sure how well this works.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm not quite sure how radiometric dating is a problem for the theist.
Well,
presumably, with Adam and Eve, when they were first created, they had a garden that was fully created. There were plants and whatnot. Is that not correct?
Right. I think I
Yeah.
see where you're going with this now.
Right. And so those plants, they were created less than 7 days before, but they seemed like they were several years old. So if the universe was created in such a way that from then everything would be built as if it had existed longer, that doesn't mean it actually existed.
And there are theists who will argue that. They will say it doesn't matter how old the Earth appears to be because because God could create the Earth with the appearance of age. So, for instance, when you see stars that are, more than 6,000 light years away, then they'll say, oh, well, that's not a problem. I mean, it would be a problem scientifically because if the universe was only 6,000 years old, then at the moment the stars were created, the light would have started traveling and it wouldn't have reached us yet.
Well, yeah, and
But they say that's not a problem
itself,
because
though.
God created the light in transit.
Yeah, but you have that
Yeah.
same problem with the garden. If you're going to question the stars, you have to be questioning the garden. And so then it seems like the story, just because there's the garden there, when that they were put into, the garden was all ready for them to eat the fruit, that the story must be wrong. And it seems like you're begging the question somewhat in doing that. So, but anyway, this moves me on to my next point, which is about evidence. It seems like on the Atheist Experience, people have seem to think that evidence is very important. You were talking about how the theist would push aside the evidence that he doesn't believe in and only take that evidence that supports his views. Is that correct?
Sure.
Yep.
And so I'm just worried because it seems at the beginning of the century there were a group of people, the Vienna Circle, that embraced a sort of theory of knowledge that was called verificationism, where things they would believe would only be things that were verifiable. And there was a lot of work in which people tried to, verify verificationism, and they ran into problems such as, Russell's paradox and the incompleteness theorem.
Sure.
And it worries me if we're going to say these people are ignoring evidence and saying that they have to take some things on faith. If we're going to have a verificationist viewpoint, that itself is taken on faith as well, isn't it?
Well, I mean, one thing that pops to mind is a shirt that I really like that is a reproduction of an XKCD cartoon, which just says, "Science, it works, bitches." Part of the reason that science has become so widely accepted anyway is because following a scientific method has resulted in such a huge explosion of results. And, I think that you can demonstrate to a certain extent that even people who are religious apologists are now sort of forced, in order to be taken seriously, to act like they're taking on a scientific viewpoint, and basically say, the whole concept of scientific creationism rose up in the 60s, and it was because when they tried to push more, creationism gradually got driven out of schools because people in general already recognize that science has accomplished a lot and has a lot more credibility.
Credibility only insofar as it's verifiable.
Sure.
Mhm.
But I mean, what you want to say is, how do you know? I mean, I guess your question is, how do you know that looking for evidence is the right way to obtain knowledge?
The right way. Well, I'm more getting at the only way to obtain knowledge, or that, yeah.
Well, I mean, I personally would never say that that only things that can be verified are true. I mean, that would be ridiculous. I mean, scientists would agree that there are lots and lots of things that are probably true that we have no idea about. So the most reasonable position to take at that point is a position of like withholding judgment, temporary skepticism, which is not the same as outright denial.
Oh, right, and so why is that reasonable, though? That's a point that I'm not quite understanding.
Why is it reasonable to not accept a claim without sufficient evidence?
Yes. Why is it reasonable to only rely on these things?
Because what's your alternative?
Yeah.
Well, for the theist, clearly, there's been a long tradition of believing in God.
Right, certainly. I mean, you know, there's a long tradition of taking things on faith, like Jen talked about earlier. But I mean, with all the different contradictory faiths that are actually out there, and some of them really clearly harmful, like the example that's become so easy to bring up, the September 11th hijackings. How do you distinguish? But I mean, you know, what is faith but basically acting on your fervent opinion that it's true without requiring any evidence? And how would you go about distinguishing one kind of faith from the other?
Well, I'm not quite sure that you'd want to use the September 11th hijackings.
Well, sure I do.
As an example.
Why not?
There may be more non-religious basis behind that, having to do with the American occupation of the Middle East, the British occupation of the Middle East. If this had happened to Russia,
right? But do you
do
you deny that the specific people who took the initiative to fly those planes into buildings actually believed in their afterlife?
I think. What about the people in the American Revolution when what is it? The shot that shocked the world or whatnot? Were those people that were voting against the government? Were those people religious? Did they think that they would go to heaven? Well, or were they simply too afraid? Well, I'm not quite sure, actually.
Well, we have about 15 seconds.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're running out of time, and we're sorry.
So, yeah, I'd just be worried about saying that religion is what causes this, when it seems like there are plenty of times in the past.
All right, well, thanks for calling. I'm sure we'll take up this topic another time. That's our show, and thank you, everyone, again, for tuning in. And thank you for being here and having such an interesting topic.
Thanks.
And we'll catch you all next week.